I don't want OpenAI to fail. I just want them to clean up
No,
their act.
but
I just want them
they
to
may
clean
do
up
it
their
anyway.
act.
They
I
may
want them
fail.
to clean up their act. I am actively rooting for aggressive competitors to Google, because as you
Yeah.
alluded to, Andy, everybody said Google is toast. They're not toast because they have so much money and they have been able to really kind of right the ship from a user retention standpoint. But people don't do everything with Gemini.
And we may or may not get into this in more detail, but by the way, as we talked about before the show and in other shows, one of the reasons that they're going to be so dominant is because they have the most data. Like my little anecdote about that was that Gemini started pulling details from my email, and I didn't know that I'd given it opportunity or permission to do that, and pointed out something to me about a medication that I was prescribed that might contribute to high liver enzymes or something, and that seems like some sort of a violation of one of the rules or laws or something. And it turned out that it was right, and it was actually a logical and extremely personal and useful personal bit of information. But that is a consequence of Google having access to more about me than just about any other entity does, even and especially including, Meta or Facebook.
And so pivoting to our conversation about ad dollars, because, that was one of the topics of today's episode is that ChatGPT has now introduced ads into the free tier of of ChatGPT. And
They're terrible.
And they're terrible because they don't have the data, and they'll likely continue to be terrible because they don't have the data. And so for advertisers, you're going to go where your ad dollars are most efficient and where you're going to acquire customers for the least amount. And if you have an inefficient marketplace because you don't have the data, then you're not going to win the ad dollars that are projected for OpenAI.
AI mode is doing the same thing. I mean, Google has been trying to figure out ads. They put ads in AI overviews. They've been testing those for a long time. They put ads in AI mode. And those ads, I mean, the ads in AI overviews turn out to be a little bit better, but the ads in AI mode are pretty much like the ChatGPT ad, which, I mean, I don't want to share my screen, but I use Safari in a non-logged in way, and I saw my first ChatGPT ad, which is an ad for, I did a search for HVAC repair 94118, and it showed an ad at the bottom, and it was just a very, very run-of-the-mill kind of display, kind of horizontal display, rectangular display ad. And there's no way in hell that anybody's going to click on that ad, nor did it have any real branding elements to make it noteworthy or memorable. And so my takeaway from that is, I mean, your point about data, I think, is really important. But my takeaway is these ads have to become fundamentally different. They have to be a different animal than what we've seen in traditional display ads. And they also have to, they just have to be more engaging to people. They need to carry more branding. They need to be interactive and give people a reason to pay attention to them, because right now they're just not going to do that. And
They have to be threaded through the conversation, really like that. The differentiator in this environment is the conversation. So it's
Correct.
the chat, right? So
that's the medium.
That's the medium. And so, word of mouth, we all know, is the greatest form of referral or substantiating why somebody should go with this product versus that. So that being the case, that's the opportunity, right? So if you're chatting about something and you're looking to find whatever it might be, and it says, would you like me to recommend a few options for you? Here's what I think are good solutions. If you like, I can find more. And then it leads you down that path, and then it's presenting options for you. That is a much more effective kind of ad environment than a display ad or anything else that's come before it.
I would even argue, I think you could leverage some of the patterns that, ChatGPT, Claude, et cetera, use. Like, imagine if an advertiser developed a skill, like a Claude skill, and made that branded skill available in the right moment. So like, I'm shopping for a car. Okay, would you like to use the Kelley Blue Book skill to evaluate your options.
100%.
That's the
And I don't-
connector kind of thing you're talking about, John. That's like, it's sort of like app on demand or
app on demand. And I mean, at its furthest kind of like, putting some ideas together at its furthest kind of rendering, which should be hard from a privacy standpoint, but maybe not impossible. What if I get an ad for Experian credit, whatever, and it says, do I have permission to scan your email to sort of see red flags and green flags around your credit score implications? And now it's because of its connector through run the Experian credit improvement skill with limited access to your email, and now all of a sudden it comes back to me with bespoke or personalized recommendations based on what it sees. And hey, would you like to turn this into credit score monitoring or talk to an advisor? Like, that's the kind of thing that, to your point, I mean, like, let's take off the table whether that works at all in with privacy concerns. But that is, Andy, aligned with what you're talking about in terms of like leverage the medium where this is happening.
That's what I was trying to argue, that you have to create an ad that's appropriate to the medium. You can't just port over the previous kind of formats and expect them to work. I mean, you have to really have to modify the ad unit. I mean, if I'm doing planning for a trip to, Montreal or something like that, well then if hotels.com comes in and says, would you like to search hotels in this area, or would you like to be able to book a hotel? Yeah, then I might be inclined to use it. And, it needs to be clearly identified as an advertiser. But in that context, that might make sense. I can do a deeper dive. I can do more searching, and maybe I could get the transaction. Or with some sort of agentic capability, maybe it can get me pretty close to the transaction without me having to do too much conventional filtering and searching.
There's going to have to be some standardization of data sharing of how that is. So, for example, a very basic version of that is when you register or you authenticate through Google on another app, right? And Google tells you on that page, this is the information that we're going to share with that app. Do you want to log in now? And you go ahead and do it. That's a version of you authenticating and sharing your information. Now, your information in that case is your name and your email address and maybe your image of your Google photo that you have in your account. That's usually the data set that gets packaged with that. But I could see an environment where there's a much more sophisticated kind of list of, here's the information that this third party wants to be able to access to do its thing, to do the Experian thing that you're talking about, John.
Yep.
or that type of a thing. And it would give you a list of permissions that you could check off and say, here's what's required to do this. Are you okay with that? And it puts you as the user in the driver's seat. And there's going to have to be some sort of standardization of that data share in order for these to be highly effective in that moment. Otherwise, you're just going to have to personalize each one of these experiences, which is limiting and also takes a lot of time.
I mean, privacy advocates for a long time have advocated like a digital locker where you control the information, and you can then do what you're describing, Andy, which is to agree to give over some or all of that information to a particular historically publisher or advertiser. But in this context, it would be an AI tool. And I think if you could do that, could include credit card and name and address and certain kinds of preferences and what have you, whatever. There could be a short list and a long list. That could be quite useful and convenient for people. Security becomes a real issue in that context. And with agents in general, security is a huge potential problem. I mean, just think about all the bad actors who could come in and misrepresent something and get you to interact with their thing, and then suddenly they're using AI to steal your data.
Well, I'll give you a real world example because this just happened to me a couple of weeks ago. Is that and this didn't start out with an AI kind of thing, but I can see how it led to it, which was I went traveling. I logged onto the Wi-Fi at the place that I was staying at, and there was some sort of application that spoofed my IP address, logged into my Facebook account, created another account within my Facebook account, took over my business manager account, my ad account.
Jesus.
Kicked us all, me and my team kicked us all out of our ad account, took over the account, started pointing traffic to their website, racked up $10,000 on
Oh
my
my
credit
God.
card to, and I was locked out. I'm like, who do I try to, get in touch with Meta Ads, anybody at Meta Ads, to
It's
no
very
avail.
hard. That's yeah. I had
Very
a, I had
hard.
a
And
on a smaller scale. I had something similar happen. Yeah.
yeah, and so obviously there's AI in all of this, and we played this cat and mouse game where I kicked them out of the account, they kicked me back out of the account, and I've now had to double down on authenticator apps and other forms of two-factor authentication. Which, by the way, anybody who's listening to this, definitely add two-factor authentication to all of your accounts and start getting into the practice of changing your passwords probably every month at this point, because the risk is real. And with these agentic AI applications that are available and people are creating, there's a lot of nefarious kind of activity that's happening. And that's a long-winded way of saying that the landscape is changing very quickly, and the risks are real. But coming back to uh, just what we're talking about in terms of whether it's how people are using these tools, and this is a very confusing kind of environment for the layman who doesn't have experience debugging some of these agents that people are creating. What do you do in that kind of an environment? So, and also you couple that with, we're moving into this experience where there's so much more data that's being collected as part of this. One of the stories that we were going to talk about today, which is new hardware devices that are coming into the market, right? Google just brought into this market the new Google computer. It's the Google Book is what it is. OpenAI is rumored to bring an AI native phone. Apple may be putting cameras into AirPods. Certainly you have the Meta glasses. All of these are inputs, new data that builds onto your profile. And so when we're talking about creating custom experience or personalized experiences, all of this data is really rich data that didn't exist, from here before. None of this stuff was available, but all of that is appended into your personalization profile, especially on Meta and Google.
Google had to answer OpenAI when ChatGPT came out in November of 2022, and they had been, I mean, they were a pioneer in the AI space, so their efforts with Gemini are just a continuation of that. But they had to build a product that would keep people on Google, and now what they're saying is that they're making more money with AI, right? That AI is allowing them to serve ads against certain kinds of queries that they couldn't have served ads against in the past. And the main benefit to Google, I mean, beyond whatever efficiency they're getting on the back end, the main benefit to Google of consumer-facing AI is this data collection phenomenon. They are collecting so much information based on just the conversational inputs. John, you were referencing your email, but I mean, over time, you unconsciously give these tools so much information about you. It's more than any behavioral profiler retargeting platform could ever have dreamed.
All the non-explicit stuff, right? The implicit information of just like geographically, where are you in Google Maps, just doing a tagging
Yeah,
on you.
where do you go? How much, they can infer enormous amounts of information,
Yeah.
your income, your role. I mean, you just, once you become comfortable with these things, you just start talking to them and you don't even really realize how much information you're feeding them. And Google can take all of that and profile you and target you with these additional layers of data, or retarget you accordingly. They built Chrome in part for targeting and tracking purposes, and this is so much better than cookies.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this kind of goes back to the connectors and context stuff, right? A little bit. So like if it's true, some version of the company with the most context wins, if some version of that is true, it's probably OpenAI probably has the least right now, because and maybe Claude to some degree, but let's say OpenAI. We're pouring our hearts out to OpenAI, but unless we kind of go out of our way, it doesn't have access to our breadcrumbs and to our locations and to the things we've searched for, and to our email and whatever, right? So then you kind of go to the next on the list, might be Meta, Facebook, Instagram. They've got a lot longer history on most of us, and that probably enables a little bit more data. And then you got Google. And Google now, all of a sudden, to your point, Greg, like has, all this and then some. It's the single place that most people are going to go to search for their airplane tickets or to look for a restaurant to go to or whatever. Now, the one we haven't talked to about in this list, and I'm going to say is number one quietly that nobody's talking about, is Apple. And the reason is because you have all that stuff that Google has, especially because I'm carrying around this little geo, location device in my pocket. Plus, they are going to turn on through their SDK when Apple AI really happens, AI data flowing from every single app that you have into Apple Intelligence, so that your personal assistant on your phone can know how many steps you're taking on Strava and what books you're listening to on Kindle or on Audible and all that stuff.
And dwell time and proximity time next to your friends.
And that will be a whole nother like almost now complete layer of data on top of all the other things that Google could do that trumps everything.
Well, and they are expanding their ads. Apple is expanding ads. They're putting in more ads in more places, and they're going to use some of this information in order to target ads.
Just like Google is. I mean, Google, obviously Google owns Android, and so you have that whole,
it's complete. Google has Gmail, Chrome, Android, YouTube, and Google Search.
I would also just add that this AI assistant having visibility into all the things that I'm doing is the perfect excuse to extract all of the important data from all the apps that I use to have a much more complete view of me, right? So like if you imagine, okay, for like a widget or something, what is the real reason that iOS would ask Amazon Kindle what book I'm reading? Like that's a little sketchy in the current kind of iPhone situation. It's clearly a data grab kind of an ask. But as soon as there's a personal AI, you can say, hey, look, just feed the books that this person's reading so that we can have that context so we can answer more effectively. It's a perfect excuse to grab everything.
Well, right. I mean, the one side of personalization is that you generate a better experience for the end user for reasons that are semi-obvious. And the flip side of that, the dark side of the moon, is we're going to have all this data about you and we're going to use it to target you. And, some people will be fine with that and they'll welcome the more relevant ads, quote unquote. And other people will be totally weirded out by it. And, it seems like there had been this sort of privacy momentum, in Europe, and then with certain US states passing privacy rules. And now with AI, I think it feels like that's all gone, because they can do so much. You're voluntarily using these tools. There's so much inferring that can happen just from those conversations, and that can all be deployed in the service of ads and ad revenue.
It's really fascinating, how fast on the one hand things are moving and it's lightning speed, and then on the other hand, it still is. There's so much that it's not impacting yet, or how many people it hasn't impacted, and we are very much in this divide that's happening, of those who are digging in further versus those who haven't even dipped their toe in the water yet. So
all the more reason to listen to this podcast to make
exactly. So
get on the train.
And on that note, like and subscribe and share. And we'll wrap it up for today, guys. This was a great conversation, and thank you all for listening. We appreciate it. Tell your friends, and we will see you on the next show. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate it.